Star Walker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. Hello, fellow gamer. Welcome to episode 258 of Game Master's Journey. I'm your host, Lex Starwalker, and on this show, we discuss the craft and the art of game mastering. I've been running RPGs for over 28 years now, and I produce this show in the hopes that you can benefit from my experience, my triumphs, and my mistakes. So, friend of the show and fellow GM Brett is going to be joining me today, and we are going to talk a bit about D&D campaigns or really just RPG campaigns in general. Brett's been on the show before, way back in episode 171, I think it was. I've played in Brett's campaign. He plays in my campaign. And sometimes it's just fun to sit down with another GM and compare notes, as it were. So we talk about a variety of things today, including some thoughts on using XP versus using milestones versus hand waving, leveling. And we just talk a lot about Brett's campaign, which I played in, and we ended that a while ago. And just kind of comparing notes about it. I find it really interesting as GMs. I think we tend to be far more critical of the adventures and the campaigns that we run than our players often are. So it's kind of interesting to kind of hear what Brett thinks about how the campaign went versus how I felt the campaign went as a player. And that's really interesting things to talk about. We also talk about a little bit about strongholds and how they can help your campaign. And finally, we talk a bit about whether or not to tell the players the difficulty number they're shooting for when they make a roll. And, you know, when do we share that number versus when do we not? Is there a hard and fast answer to that? So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to having Brett on and talking with him about these things. And I hope that you enjoy the discussion and find it enlightening to hear about a GM's campaign from both perspectives at the same time, from the GM's perspective and from the player's perspective. So before we get Brett on here and get into that, I want to announce that my latest D&D supplement is finally finished. It's finally out. It's called Adventures of Primordia. And it is a collection of various player character options that I've come up with for my games. There are some new cleric domains in there, some new player character subraces, magic items, spells, equipment, all kinds of stuff. So that is available now on the store at starwalkerstudios.com. You can head there and check it out. And I've also got a little bundle deal going on right now. So you can get all three of my supplements together in a package deal and save a little bit of money doing that. So that is my adventure for D&D, The Trickster's Labyrinth, my second supplement, which was Relics of Power, which is all about creating magic items that scale in power with the player characters. And then finally, Adventures of Primordia. So please go check those out, and really appreciate everyone who's gotten copies of my various RPG supplements. Really appreciate it. Also, I want to send a shout out and a thank you to our new patron, Eric. Thank you so much, Eric. Really appreciate all the patrons. And thanks everyone for keeping this show and keeping me going. I really appreciate it. So without further ado, let's move on with the episode and let's get Brett on here and let's start talking about our campaigns. I'm not sure if it was the last time you were on, but one of the times you were on, we talked about your campaign.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that was way back in August of 2017. Holy cow.
Holy crap.
Like
that
2
was
years ago.
That's nuts.
Yeah, I was trying to remember. I feel like it's been maybe a year since we played your campaign. Maybe more, maybe less. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I just logged into Roll20 a little while ago, and of course I don't have any updates on it. But yeah, it must have been at least a year by now.
Wow, time just flies by.
I know. It was an interesting campaign. If I were to have started it now, knowing what I know now, I would have done things a lot differently. So there's so little magic in it, in the story itself, in the world. That I would have my next. I'm starting to brainstorm for a new campaign, and it's going to be like all high fantasy.
Cool.
I want magic everywhere. It was missing. I think everybody. Well, I feel like everybody got bored because there wasn't much to it, and there was started this whole slog concept of going story to story. So, and I begin to question how feasible it is to actually run a level 1 to 20 campaign.
Yeah, I've been wondering about that a lot myself.
Because I think if you're planning to do something up to level 20, you've got to find a way to move faster.
Yeah.
Because I moved way too slow. You just using the XP counts.
Yeah.
It took forever for you guys to level.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I've talked about this on the podcast, I think, many times before.
You have, yeah.
They somewhere, I think it's in the DMG, they recommend kind of a leveling pace of like 2 to 3 sessions per level.
Yeah, I just read that this morning.
Yeah, but when you look at like the XP you get for things, like there's no way you could do that unless you were playing like 12-hour sessions with like 8 massive combats or yeah, there's just the XP doesn't add up. I feel like they had like one design philosophy when they wrote that, and then they had a totally different one when they designed like the XP. And that seems very old school where like, you know, you're playing for a month just to get a level, you know, like,
right.
Like every week for a month just to gain 1 level. And I don't know, maybe part of that is very different ideas of how to approach D&D, like the old school, like, oh, your character is going to be 10th level for 3 months in real world time before you earn that level, versus more modern where it's like, yeah, we kind of want to level like every other session, you know,
well,
or even every session.
Right. And there are 2 very specific philosophies around this game, right? There's the hardcore, almost like lingering in back towards Pathfinder and the old, even 3.5. We won't talk about 4, but 3.5 methodology of like accruing. You know, it's a game, so you build up XP. Everybody expects that through video games and other games like that.
Yeah.
But then you've got the other side, the other philosophy, which is like, this is a social game. This is a storytelling game. And sometimes there's a real slog when it comes to trying to mash out XP when you're trying to get a story to its end, right?
Yeah, totally. You know, and I kind of ran into that with my campaign where, you know, I told you guys in the beginning, we're going to go to 20th level and beyond, which is really what I wanted to do. And I still do, but
I'm still excited for that beyond. Yeah.
And you guys are what, like 8th, 9th level at this point? And we've been playing like 2 years.
Right. Yeah.
But it's funny because I literally thought about, what if I just leveled you guys every single time we played?
Mm-hmm.
And I was willing to do it as a GM. I'm like, I don't care. I'll do it. But then, you know, you guys would make comments about like how many abilities you had, you know,
right.
and it really made me think, I'm like, if I level you guys every time we play, I think at least for some of you, it would actually be too much, and it'd be too much bookkeeping, like having to level every week and
you'd
having
lose track fast.
Yeah,
for sure.
So yeah, I kind of tend to agree with you. Going from level 1 to 20 in one campaign, unless you're like in high school or college where you can literally game, you know, multiple 4-hour sessions a week or something.
Right.
Just
Well,
not.
they even say when you're trying to progress that quickly that everything they're talking about, I came across the line that says every way that they're projecting the level increases is based on like individual 4-hour sessions. So like every session is like 4 hours long, and you'd be able to progress that way. But yeah, I think doing an hour or two at a time for a game, I think if you could, you can spread that out though too. It wouldn't necessarily need to be, we have to level after every campaign. We have to make things harder after every session.
Yeah.
You could easily finesse that to where, I mean, even in their charts, in their optional rule or variant rules, they were talking about, after level 10, it would be like every 2 or 3 sessions or something like that. I can't remember the quote, but you can finesse that down even to, first through 1 through 5 levels would be like every other campaign or every other session rather, or, and then just keep it like that. And wherever it feels pertinent to the story, kind of like, actually, if you mix it, if you do a hybrid between milestones and actual gameplay, I wonder how that would work.
Yeah, well, that's kind of another related topic is the whole XP thing. And, again, in my campaign I've been running with you guys, you saw this where I started out, handing out XP, and I would, in the forum, every session, I would be like, you got this much XP for this, and this much for that, and this much for that. Because, again, thinking like the old school, like that's your reward. It's like, oh, I spent time role playing with this NPC, and now I got this XP. And the whole idea of like rewarding what you want to see more of. But no one ever once commented on that. And I honestly believe that no one even paid attention to where the XP was coming from or cared much, oh, we got extra XP because we befriended the Tyrannosaurus instead of killing it, or if that was happening, I never saw it. It was never discussed.
I think it was more of a, I know I was excited every time we got XP for doing something that was like above and beyond or outside the norm, like like befriending Petunia.
Well, that's good.
But because that's always good to see. Well, yeah, and I think everybody else did too. But we kind of it's not that we expected it. It's just it was something that was not really something we would comment on. It was just like, wow, that's awesome. We got to do that. And I think it's neat to see that kind of reward monetarily. I think that's my hang up from old school gaming is like, I like to see when you get XP for doing something that's above and beyond or outside the box.
Right. Yeah. And so it's a way for the GM to also kind of communicate what they like,
Right.
Like if I reward you guys every time you do something ridiculous and goofy, I'm basically telling you, oh, we want a Monty Python kind of campaign. And if I do just ridiculous things, I'm going to get XP,
Right.
So I definitely think if you're going to hand out XP, that you kind of need to tell the players what they're getting and why, because otherwise there's no point to it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Otherwise it's just it gets dangerous too, because if you have somebody who's counting, the bean counters of the group who are like, I only need 500 more XP. I got to kill this gnome.
Right. Yeah.
And that gets, it's a little bit of, I guess that's the epitome of metagaming, isn't it?
Yeah. And then I started going more to milestones, but even the milestones, what they recommend for those, you're not going to see that leveling pace. It's going to be slower. And so what I eventually did is, and how I was doing it at the very end, was I decided kind of how many sessions I wanted it to take for you guys to level. And then I just took the amount of XP you needed and divided it by that, and then use that to determine what my milestones were worth. So at that point, I'm like, why am I even using XP? I'm just gaming it so that you guys level when I want you to. I should just hand wave it at this point.
Right. Yeah. But, as you say that, there's almost a degrading of the value of leveling when we as DMs just decide on the third game you're going to be at second level or something like that. It kind of takes a little bit away from the players, but that's almost a knee-jerk reaction. I don't know if it really does. I know I'm talking in circles.
No, I've had the same question, like, does it, because I agree, like, it seems to me if I just arbitrarily say you level whenever I feel like it doesn't seem like it matters what you do. It's like, if I just show up, I'm going to level.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're playing the game, you're going to continue along. So does it become a case of creating, different types of rewards or a system of rewarding extra play or if you fall heavily into the RP of the session, or you're able to turn the tide unexpectedly, you pull out all the all the heavy shit and win the day. Is that something that can be rewarded in some other way besides XP or just like random magic items?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's interesting because we're both kind of wondering the same thing. So it makes me think that there's a lot of DMs out there wondering.
I bet there
about
are
the same things. And yeah, and I mean, the XP thing, it just turns into a lot of paperwork and math for the GM. Yeah. And that was kind of why I eventually went away from it, because I'd spend like half an hour just figuring out the XP. And then it didn't really seem like the players cared that much one way or the other. And it's like, I could just say you guys level and it would take me 10 seconds instead of half an hour. And it seems like it would be the same for you guys either way.
Right.
So.
Right. And if I remember correctly, we were split even amongst our group what we preferred.
Yeah, and I think so.
I might have been the only holdout for XP now that I'm thinking about it, to which I apologize.
Yeah, I don't remember who liked what, and then the other thing is, like, what do you do when people miss? Because I've always been a strong believer in, if you're not there, you shouldn't get XP, and that's kind of a reward for showing up, and also a deterrent for like skipping game sessions when you don't need to. Right. But again, it just leads to more paperwork for the DM, because then you end up with player characters at different levels, which makes designing encounters a little trickier. And
right.
So that was something else that I kind of, through the campaign, I started out very much like everybody had their own XP, but more and more as we went on, I just kind of started giving everybody the same amount and not worrying if someone missed, and because it just didn't seem to matter really.
Right.
I don't know.
I don't think there's an answer. I think it really does come down to what we want from each game. And it doesn't, I don't think it varies even from GM to GM. I think it would be more, really more game to game, what you want out of the game. What do you want out of the story? Right.
Right. Yeah, for sure. But probably your best bet might be to just not worry about XP unless you're really sure you want to, because it is a lot more work.
It is more work. Yeah.
So if you are very passionate, like I want to use XP and I have these reasons why, then go for it. But if you're like, I don't know, maybe don't worry about it.
So then at that point, it becomes a conversation with the players too, right? What are they expecting? And and how do they prefer to play, especially if you're playing with new players or new to you?
Yeah. Although you'll probably get an answer of I don't care, which
most
seems
likely.
Like whenever I ask players about these kinds of things, they're like, I don't care. Whatever, I don't care.
We're going to level, right?
Yeah. As long as they level occasionally, that's all they care about.
Right.
It's like if we play for 6 months and never level, then we're going to care. But other than that,
we're going to have a conversation. Yeah.
As long as we get a level when we feel like we should, like we don't care what's going on behind the curtain. So yeah, let's talk more about your campaign, because I think this will be interesting. Yeah. Because I think there can often be a big difference in the way like the GM sees the campaign and the way the players do.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And just talking to you in the past, I know we're similar in that we tend to be more critical of our campaigns than the players tend to be. And we tend to have a lower opinion of how things are going than the players do. Because like you said, you were talking about people getting bored. And I mean, the only times I really remember being bored, I don't think it was because of the campaign. It was just because one of the player characters was getting involved in something that either I or my character didn't care about.
Oh yeah.
Like I remember being bored a lot because there was a lot of human politics and my character was a dwarf. And at least in the beginning of the campaign, I was kind of like, I don't think my character would even listen to this conversation because I'm a dwarf. I'm not a human. The politics have nothing to do with me.
Right.
And I actually,
that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually came up with, he was all like enamored with the queen and everything.
Yeah. Until he met the queen, he wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. That's right.
And part of that was like, oh, now I have an excuse to start caring about the politics and have my character be more into it so I can be more into it.
Right. Yeah, I had designed Sereth to be the capital city of that region, to be a very, very open, very integrated society where you had all the different races living together in this mass community, and it everything kind of came together and became its own society. But in doing so, yeah, it kind of whitewashed a lot of it. And that's one of the things I would change. There's not a lot of diverse cultures inside that. Not a lot of everything seemed to be for the city of Sereth and not for individual groups. Or you had the underlying groups like the our equivalent of the Thieves Guild and that sort of thing. But it felt like it was too human. And the funny thing, it was too human, and yet nobody of the group was human, if that makes sense.
Was no one human?
Nobody was human. Terry's character was high elf. You were a dwarf, and Andy's character was a half orc.
That's right. None of us were human.
It's the craziest team, but
the usual D&D group, right? No humans.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though the world's predominantly human, most player characters are not.
Humans just on adventure.
Although I think that might be less true in 5th edition because humans are pretty badass with the extra feet and everything. I've seen a lot more humans in this edition than I did in the past.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, that's I don't know, I hear what you're saying, but I know from experience, like designing a city is hard. I mean, you're never going to be done. There's always like more stuff you need.
Yeah.
So
I even considered at one point through the game, I considered an attack on Sereth from a DM's totally selfishly.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to redo Sereth. and I figured the only way to do that is to get some city from the east to launch an attack against Sereth. And I never got to do that, thankfully.
I wonder if that's a DM thing, because I've thought many times about wiping out Dianara's Rest just to do it, just to surprise you guys, just because I figured like you wouldn't expect that, because it's like, oh, Lex built up all these NPCs and blah, 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 blah. Now he just wiped the whole thing out.
And now it's all gone. Yeah. We'd spend months trying to figure out what it was we did wrong. What could we have done differently? So yeah, it's I feel like, and maybe it's because from the DM's perspective, I felt like the story was meandering. It was more like a babbling brook. It just kind of wandered all over the place. But I still had, in my mind, an overarching story arc or storyline.
Yeah.
Where things were going to happen. But I think my error was I didn't keep that in the forefront. I tried almost like an episodic series, a TV show or what have you. I had too many filler episodes that went off on their own things, and we forgot about the overarching plot. So So I think I went too big on that. That's one of the things I would change.
Cool. Well, one thing I liked about it was you did have, instead of like we look at some of the published campaigns like Tyranny of Dragons, or I guess really any of the published campaigns, where it's like one story for the entire campaign, whether it's 1 to 20 or 1 to 15 or 1 to 10, whatever levels you're playing.
Right.
And it just gets old. I mean, whether it's Tyranny of Dragons, The Curse of Strahd, I don't care what it is. If you're doing the same story for that long, you're going to get bored with it. And that's one thing I thought was cool about your campaign was, to me, it seemed more like a series of, I don't know, 4 or 5 campaigns kind of chained together, as opposed to just one story that went on and on and on and on. It was more like we'd have a story, we'd play through that, resolve that, and then there'd be like the next season, like the new story. And and you're right. Okay. I guess there was less of a sense of like that big overarching like meta story or whatever.
Right.
But I don't think that was all bad necessarily. Because yeah, that can get old.
True.
Especially if you're going like level 1 to 20 and you're like, wow, I just played this character from level 1 to 20, but they really only did one thing. You know, they prevented the Dragon Queen from coming back into the world, and that's all they did for their entire career. You know,
that's a good point. If you're thinking about the character development, that's,
or even worse, like a mega dungeon, like Undermountain. It's like all I did was explore this one mega dungeon. That's all I've ever done.
50 years old, you're done with adventuring. Well, time to write a book.
Yeah, I think I take a lot of inspiration from TV, and we have so much great TV these days. And a lot of these TV shows now, it's like each season is kind of its own storyline. Like, you look at like, I don't know, like Jessica Jones. It's like each season is a different villain or whatever.
Right.
And I think maybe that's a better way to approach a campaign than like this huge story that's going to last. Like a TV show that's 7 seasons long and it's just one story for the whole thing. You'd be better to have 7 different stories with maybe some kind of overarching something. And this is just an idea, but the overarching thing, instead of being like a meta story, maybe it could be like a character arc for each of the PCs, because that's how a lot of times the TV shows do it. So instead of like the overarching thing is we're saving the world, maybe it's this character learns not to be such an asshole, or I don't know. The dwarf gets over his fear of magic or something like that over the course of, these 7 stories or whatever. I don't know.
Right.
Because that's something that you can come back to. Like, periodically touch on the fact that the dwarf's getting a little more okay with magic, but you don't have to hit it like every session, or I don't know.
I like that. And it gets rid of the boredom of keeping the same plot and going from, you can go level 1 to 10 and there's this big end, this big thing that you have to do at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
And leading up to it, if it's this big campaign where there's a success value at the end of it, and you go from level 1 to 18 or 19 without actually achieving that final win, that's really frustrating.
Yeah, or you just don't get to it because you don't play long enough, or you
I don't know what you're talking about.
So one of the things you mentioned was you felt there wasn't enough magic, and I thought that was interesting. Because my perception as a player, I mean, I definitely noticed when we were like in the city, it seemed almost like Game of Thrones. And I don't know if you were going for that, but it always reminded me of Game of Thrones because your game was very political. There are always these different groups in the city that were, had their machinations or whatever, and were oftentimes at odds with one another. And we were kind of like caught between, the authorities of the city and the, I can't remember what it was called, but there was some company or something that the other guys worked for.
Yeah, it was the,
it's like a mercenary or an adventuring company or something.
Oh, yeah. Well,
the Red Door, was that it?
You guys had the Red Door, and you had there for a whole story. There was the War Mage.
Yeah, That's what I was thinking of, was this crazy mage in this organization we're working for, but we're pretty sure he's the bad guy.
Right.
Like, that was interesting. But yeah, in the city, didn't see a lot of, like non-humans necessarily. Well, I don't know. I mean, we saw like other PC races, but we didn't see like the high fantasy, like a dragon never flew over the city and set fire to something or
right.
or anything
There
like
were
that.
There were, as part of the story, there was no dragon on Terrandal.
Oh,
so
cool.
At all that anybody knew. There was, Terrandal is just this island continent like Australia, right? And for as long as anybody could remember, there was no dragon. So
I remember I think you threw a beholder at us at one point. And I remember as a player being a little like, I was surprised. Like, I was at that point, like, I thought that your world didn't have things like beholders, because it was, more, I don't want to say mundane, but I can't think of another word.
No, it totally was.
Like, non-magical.
Mm-hmm.
But then I don't know, it's kind of cool. I was like, well, I'm like, these things exist in Brett's world, but they're just like out in the wilds. You're not going to see them around a city or something, but the more kind of out in the middle of nowhere you get, the more crazy stuff you run into, like beholders or things from other planes. And so I don't know. I thought it was cool. And it was cool to kind of have that moment where like you thought you understood the world and you realized that you didn't, or you learned something new. And so that was cool.
Oh, good. Okay. I'm glad to hear that.
Kind of like if Game of Thrones at some point would have had like some high fantasy come in and like, oh, turns out the Maesters have this crazy magic that some of them can do that no one knew about, like that would have been cool.
Okay.
Never happened, but it would have been cool.
That would have been interesting. Yeah.
So let's see.
It seemed like that started to get into high fantasy toward the end, but
yeah, a bit with the dragons, but then they weren't.
And undead.
Yeah, the dragons seemed very like animal level intelligence. They weren't like D&D dragons. They weren't speaking or, using
they didn't
magic.
Have magic themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. So they seemed more like just animals that were really big and powerful and could breathe fire, or napalm or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what it was.
I'm pretty sure that was napalm.
Explosive napalm, it seemed to be. that for some reason explodes when it hits stone. I'm not sure why.
It's a chemical reaction. That's all it is.
Because it looks cool. That's why.
That's right. Yeah. So, I would like to do more. A lot of the perspective that you guys got. Well, in this case, in D&D in general, all the perspective you get is coming from the DM, right? It's part of telling the story. So that's something that I personally want to do better is lay down a better foundation of what is this city really like.
I think something that your campaign suffered from was that we often had a hard time getting together.
Oh, yeah.
So there would often be, numerous weeks of downtime between sessions. And when you're running, like if we were just running like a hack and slash dungeon crawl, it'd be fine.
Right.
But when you're trying to do like this more intricate political thing, like people are forgetting nuances of what happened or what we know. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I know at least a couple of us took crazy notes. I think maybe all three of us did.
Yeah, I think everybody took notes,
which helped. Like if I would have tried to run your campaign with some of the players I've had in the past, like it would not have gone so well because they wouldn't have taken any notes. And I would have had to constantly remind them of things, which kind of defeats the purpose of that kind of campaign. It's like the whole point is you guys are supposed to figure things out on your own.
Supposed to remember. Yeah.
Not
that's
like,
part of it.
It's like, and just handing you stuff.
Right. And the political mysteries are so hard to do as it is, even with just a week in between sessions. But to keep in my own head who belongs to what they're doing behind the scenes and all of that and keep it all in my head so that when you guys figure it out, I can say, yeah, you're absolutely right. This is it. sometimes that kind of mystery or that kind of puzzle is just too daunting, and you want to go back to the simple physical puzzles that you have in games that you just have to figure out a way to open the trap door. That's all you have to do. But when it pays off, man, it really pays off. It's a good feeling to see you guys work through everything and figure it all out. And all I had to do was mediate.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, sometimes they call it like the long con when you build up these really, involved things that take a while to kind of come about. Mm-hmm. And I definitely think like the longer that con is, the bigger the payoff at the end. But of course, the more chances that you don't get to the end. like for instance, in my campaign, when you guys finally found out that you were avatars, like that was probably one of my favorite moments as a GM like ever, because we built it up for so long, and I'd been like dribbling out like little, I wouldn't even say hints, because I didn't want you guys to figure it out before I told you, but more just like foreshadowing, where when you found out, you could be like, oh, that's why that happened, and that's why that NPC said that weird thing. And
right. And like what Dahlia said, that was such a one-off remark. I honestly didn't even think about it until after the reveal. You, as Dahlia, came back and said, that's what I was talking about. And I'm like, oh, right. Shit. How long ago was that?
Yeah. But I mean, it was risky because sure. we took numerous breaks. I mean, there were a few times it was like, is this campaign going to keep going? and in my past, I've definitely been guilty of like building up these long cons, and then we never get there. So usually I will tell people, if you have a good idea, use it right now. Don't wait. Yeah. Don't build up to it forever, because you may not get there. But that time I gambled and won, I guess.
Yeah, that was really good. That was a good one. And I know all of us are excited to get back into it eventually, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully we can. Now I'm wondering, like, I was trying to get everybody together for something else, and it's like, wow, Craig's the only person that can do it right now. And maybe Phoebe. Yeah. But maybe. It seemed like maybe it was just bad timing, because Phoebe's looking for a new job. Danielle just got a new job, so
yeah, I'm coordinating schools right now.
Yeah, so let's see. I'm looking at like what you wrote in your email. You said there are things you did well, things you totally screwed up. Yeah. So are there any things that you think went really well or really badly in the campaign that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I think so. I think to answer that, I think you have to look at it more as a batch of stories, like what you were talking about, because I think every story arc had a defining moment. Like the one thing that keeps popping out in my head is actually one that you did, where you had that with the cleric. What's the divine intervention?
Yeah,
that you were constantly rolling for it,
and it never worked.
It did work. It worked that one time, and you had asked for, I can't remember how you had specified it, but you had asked for something about the temple to Kalos.
Oh, that's right. What was it?
But it was groundbreaking. It was the way you had worded it and the way it was dealt out to you, or something. I
think it was something about when I made it hallowed ground, I wanted like an extra effect or something.
Right. Yeah, it was something along those lines.
And wasn't that how it ended up kind of on two planes at once? Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which it ended up awesome.
You had the original structure, and then everything around it was built on a different plane, and it just connected to it. And
I think what it was I asked for more space because we had all the refugees and I wanted space for and I was thinking like we dig out a basement or something, and like summon an angel or something to help me. And yeah, you ended up, it ended up like being tied to my god's plane, which was awesome.
I loved that. That was so great, the way that worked out, and the transition every time somebody walked through from the material plane to the other plane got like heavy seasick every time they walk down
cool.
into the tavern.
Well, I have to say, and this is probably something that a lot of people listening um, will recognize, and hopefully none of the other players are listening. But I'd have to say, like right now, I'd be much more excited to return to your campaign than to return to mine.
No.
Because I'm like, yeah, Keldor had just gotten this awesome temple that was on his god's plane, and he was gonna try to woo the queen, which I'm sure was gonna fail spectacularly, and I was really looking forward to that.
Yeah, they had you guys ended at a part where it would have been great for a nice little mid-session break.
Yeah,
But I think it's become an actual end. I hope I'd like to return to it someday because damn it, I want to get you guys to level 20 and you're at 18. You're almost there.
yeah.
That's the frustrating part. It's like just a little bit longer.
Or maybe at the very least, if that doesn't happen in a future campaign, Keldor can be an NPC and we can find out like what happened to him.
You can develop the story. Yeah, that would be awesome. That would be awesome.
He's like the cleric that PCs get healing from or something.
Yeah, he's now the high cleric of Sarah. Or not high, drunk. The drunk cleric.
The drunk cleric of Sarah.
The functioning alcoholic. Yeah, but as one of your players, yeah, we definitely want to get back to yours. I think I speak for everybody.
Cool.
We're super excited to get back.
Yeah, well, we will. I don't know. I just got to decide what to do next.
Well, maybe after this next run that you're planning to do, it'll create some ideas.
Yeah, like I have ideas for like down the road, but I'm thinking like I want you guys to be higher level for that. So it's like coming up with what to do to get you there.
Right.
And
we still have things to do actually.
Oh yeah.
Which is really cool. Oh yeah, and we have this new ship that we want to tour around in.
Yeah.
So that's my version of the new cleric's tower. It's like we just have this neat thing. I want to use it. So, but yeah, with I don't know what else to say about my campaign. You know what I do want to say is I've heard in other gameplays and I've read through the books, there are other there are variant rules. There are also just house rules that seem to have come from, there are games that I've played in the past where a natural one is a critical fail. It's not just a failure. It's like something has happened.
Right.
And I've seen that done in different things. And I'm pretty sure that's a house rule. That's not in any of the books, even as a variant, I don't think.
It might be a variant, but yeah.
Okay. But yeah, sure. I've seen that used. I've seen other house rules and variant rules that really add. They don't necessarily change the way the game is played. Like a critical fail could just be something aesthetic that happens, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean you lob off your hand,
right?
or anything horribly bad like that. But it could add to the tension of the circumstance.
Yeah.
I would really like to in the next game that I play, I want to focus on more of those as part of the storytelling, as part of adding that flavor to the story. And just awesome. Keep so that it's not just, we attack, we roll, we hit, we don't hit, we get hit, we end.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. I'd like to add more to it, and hopefully in doing that get more. I say get more, but keep people engaged, or at the very least keep myself engaged.
Yeah,
which I think is probably I'm putting a lot of this onto the players, and it's actually my own insecurities that I'm feeling like I was getting bored with the roles and all that stuff. So I want to keep it fresh for everybody.
Yeah, well, I want to have you on to go through the last couple chapters of the DMG, which is all variant rules and homebrewing stuff like spells and magic items and all that.
Oh, stuff. Spells. Yeah, and yes, exactly. Yeah, for sure. Definitely. But yeah, the idea of creating spells, creating monsters, making things more unique, more unique, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Is really enticing.
See, that's my problem. I get way too caught up in designing stuff. Like new cleric domains, new spells, new magic. Like sometimes I think I enjoy that more than actually running the game. It's like, I don't know what I'm going to do in the story for the next session, but I got all this new stuff for the players to play with.
Exactly. that and building a history of your world. I succumb to the whole world building problem so easily. I'm sitting here staring at the OneNote that I have for my campaign, and it's just page after page after page of stuff that you guys have no idea it even exists. It's those things where you just go on a tangent while you're writing. You're like, this happened because of this. Well, why did that happen? Oh, well, because of, and it just falls back to the beginning of time. And next thing you know, you have a world and nobody's playing.
I blame Ed Greenwood, at least for me personally, because he is kind of the ideal that I always subconsciously aspire to as a world builder. Just like, you could ask him, what kind of bread do the people in this city of the Forgotten Realms eat? And he would be able to tell you and give you the recepe. It's like, and I've often wondered how much of that, when people ask him these off the wall questions and he just boom has an answer, how much of that did he know ahead of time, and how much of that is he just pulling out of his butt, like just making up on the spot?
The important thing is that you don't know.
Right.
You don't know which is which. Yeah.
And he remembers.
He says it becomes canon. Yeah.
Yeah. So if he did just make it up, he remembers it later that, that's a thing now that I came up with. And so I think a lot of us kind of aspire, like we want our worlds to be as realized as the Forgotten Realms is, with all that nuance and depth. And it's like, well, in fairness, he's been working on that since he was a kid. True. Decades,
Very true.
So, but yeah, and it, who knows like what his mental makeup is. It's very possible, he has things going on in his brain that we don't all have, and has some gifts that we don't all have. Maybe we can't all be
has the world in his brain.
Yeah. That may not be a realistic goal for all of us.
I know it's not for me. No. I can't remember what I had for breakfast.
I definitely I think the thing I like most about running in my own world is I definitely like you ask me something about the world that I've never thought about before, but I have such a good kind of idea of how my world works that even though I've never thought of it, I instantly have an idea. So I can kind of give you an answer, even though I'm making it up right now. And I really enjoy that. And more so that than the sitting down and writing out like the history myself. I love it when the players come up with ideas and I'm like, I'm using that.
Yeah.
So what are some things with your campaign that you think went well? Because we've talked quite a bit about what you thought didn't go so well. This is the harder question, probably.
It is the harder question. Yeah, I feel like it's in a job interview now.
Well, while you think, I will say, and it's been so long, I don't know if I can think of a specific example, but I definitely remember at the time when we were playing, thinking that you did a really good job of kind of picking up on what each of the players was kind of excited about, or what we were engaging with, and like doing more with that, and kind of, I don't know how to say it, like just kind of meeting the players where they're at, and realizing what each player or character is really wanting to do, and kind of facilitating that and focusing on that. And especially because our characters were so different, like each one of us had very different things we wanted to do, very different things we were interested in. And I felt like even every session, I felt like you did a really good job of having something for like each character that they could think was cool. Or
I do think kind of riffing on that, our ability to, or our capability to kind of develop each individual story based on one particular aspect of each character's background. So Keldor, you had one or two, didn't you?
Well, the last thing we did was very much kind of about him, because we were going to establish a new temple in that other city, and
that's right.
It was a lot of like dealing with undead, and so it was very kind of in Keldor's wheelhouse.
And that was actually kind of a twofer because the plot of the story actually centered around Andy's character's backstory,
right,
and the main bad guy was from his backstory, but it lent itself to what you needed, and what got you guys to that city to begin with was actually your quest was to reestablish reestablish the temple. So that, I think in that case, that kind of a story where it pulled both of your pasts from two completely different places, pulled it into a single story arc, and you guys were able to complete both of your quests within the one campaign. I think that was, looking back on that actually worked really well.
Yeah, and also I want to point out for people listening that the whole reason that even came about, as far as my character being given a directive by my deity to go establish this temple, was because at the climax of the previous adventure, I had summoned an angel or something to help me, and he, instead of like working out payment, I was like, we got to do this right now. We'll figure that out later. And he was like, okay. Basically, I get a free favor from you, and that was what the angel wanted.
Right.
So that was awesome, because there's no way you could know I was going to do that. And you like took that opportunity, and you're like, hey, I can use this as a hook for the next thing I'm already planning, which was awesome.
And that hook at the end of that campaign, that story was primarily focused on Terry's character,
yes,
and getting him out of Hawk, because of what had happened previously with his backstory. That whole campaign before that essentially put Terry's character in prison for was it dereliction of duty, or he was part of the War Mage Corps, and he went AWOL is what it was. And so he had prison time for that. He worked out a way to get out by doing what was needed for that story. And so by the end of that one, it went nicely into the next idea. So.
Yeah, because that previous campaign was very focused on Terry's character, because he was a wizard, part of this mage corps, and we were going after the leader of the mage corps that we believed to be like a corrupt, evil wizard. And so it was very kind of focused around Terry's character in a lot of ways. And then the very next campaign was more focused around my character and Andy's character. That was really cool. And I don't think that's not easy to do, to like give equal kind of spotlight to each character, and that's not easy.
True, but it's not easy if you're trying. Well, yeah, it has its difficulties, definitely, but it also, when the players give you, and I think you've said this in your podcast before, when the players give you information about their backstories, when they give you little plot hooks written into whatever, it makes it so much easier to find ways to push that in.
For sure,
and make that work.
Like,
so that would be
when your player playing a cleric like summons a divine being to help them and doesn't bother working out the terms ahead of time.
That really, that could go any way.
And I remember,
really depends on.
Terry was like, "You're an idiot!" Like, and Lex, like, I knew that was a horrible thing to do, but I'm like, this is what Keldor would do, because he trusts his God. He's not really thinking like trying to like, be in a good bargaining position with his God. He just trusts his God, and it was like we were getting ready to do battle. There wasn't a ton of time to sit here and haggle with this angel. So I was just like, hey, we'll figure it out. Whatever you want, I'll do, and I guess part of that also was just me trusting the GM. I'm like, well, I don't think Brett's going to like completely hose me, to the ultimate that he could. He'll probably use this to do something he wants to do, which I'm cool with, Cool. So I could definitely see a more beginning player not wanting to do that, being afraid of, what's the GM going to do to me?
Sure.
Um,
Or understanding, or wondering if the GM understands what the god would do.
yeah,
Because when you think about it, the god that your cleric was worshiping wasn't really prone to antics.
right.
He was more, he's like the god of war and the god of drink.
Yeah.
So it would have to have to fit with his personality too. So
Yeah, my
all
god
that
was named
together.
Kalis for a reason.
Yeah, right.
He was very much based on the Klingon Kalis.
And we got away with it because it was not streamed.
That's right. And I spelled it differently.
That's right. We'd have to put it on the screen every time we said it. Yeah, I think that's being able to run that story. And there were a few subplots that managed to work themselves out that I really liked, that I think were done. That everybody there, and I remind everybody about this every chance I get, but you guys still never went back to collect that gold from the hidden room in the tavern from ages and ages ago. I think
know.
It was from before you started playing.
Yeah.
They came across it and they keep forgetting to get it.
And I really wanted to, but I didn't want to push on it too hard because my character kind of just knew about it through word of mouth. Like I wasn't there.
Right.
So other than the fact that I'm a greedy dwarf, I don't think that my character would be like, hey, we need to go get that stuff.
And that would have been like that could have been a one shot, really.
Yeah.
And not even a big deal. But I think it's funny that we got to a point where we would leave money behind, leave all the riches.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need that now.
One day we'll find out that there was like some ridiculously powerful legendary item that would have been perfect for each of us there. You know,
it would have done everything. Yeah.
Staff of the Magi and
yep.
For Terry's character. And
yeah, that's the story, I think is what I liked the best. Even though, as I said, I think I got bored with it.
I like the maps.
Oh, and the maps.
You had such great maps.
Thank you.
It's so great to like play in a campaign like that and have such great maps that aren't like the Forgotten Realms or, you know, some like published thing, you know, that was something the GM did. I think actually that's the first time I played a homebrewed thing where the GM had their own maps. That was really cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It did have many iterations. So the one you finally played with wasn't the first one. Obviously, it had gone through a couple of reworks. But I think I said this before last time we talked about our campaign, that the way it started was with Terry and Andy and I just getting together, and I'd DM a game, then Terry, and then Andy, and we'd rotate like that. So every time we played a game, we'd increase the map to wherever we were.
Cool.
And then when I took it on full time, I built the continent out.
Awesome. I'm jealous. That sounds awesome.
I should make I think we talked about that too. I'd like to make a map of, without being able to give anything away for myself, I'd like to make a map of Primordia.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I'd like you to make a map of Primordia, or at least, you know, the area where we've been. My idea of Primordia is very similar to the Ninth World of Numenera in that it's really, really big, and we've only really covered a very small part of it. So most of it is like gray mist at this point, except for this one small area that's actually, you know, a good size area. But
right. But, so just all around that on the map is just here there be dragons.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, and the idea with Primordia is that it was originally one huge continent that has recently split into a bunch of different ones. So there aren't even at this point any accurate maps really of the whole thing because it's recently changed. So so that could be a fun campaign of just PCs that want to map the kind of the new world, you know, like,
right?
Where is everything now? What's still here? What's gone?
I just go on rumor. City used to be here. Let's go find out where it is now.
Because that's what I need is another campaign to run.
Yeah, right. Throw in a MacGuffin. Like there's one thing that somebody left behind in this city. We have to find the city before we find the thing.
Yeah, totally. Well, Brett, was there anything else about your Terrandal campaign or the setting or anything that you wanted to talk about, or
Oh, no, I think we pretty much covered everything.
lessons learned?
Oh, you know what? Actually, big lesson learned. Um, give a stronghold to the players earlier than when we did.
Oh, yeah.
Because I think we did it when you guys were at 15th level or something like that.
Yeah.
I really should have done something like that at 10th level, but it didn't play in well. There was no place to actually give it. But I think you guys would have made more use out of a keep earlier in the campaign.
Yeah, and not only does it give the players more time to play with it, but I think a lot of the benefits that a keep would give you are much more useful at lower level.
Yes.
Especially high level. Like we were pretty high level. I mean, by that point, it's like it was cool to have a stronghold, but we didn't really need one.
Right.
Like it didn't really it wasn't like a game changing thing that, oh, now we have a stronghold. We can do this, this, and this that we couldn't do before.
Right. It became the thing that when we started to introduce the idea of different player characters. It was like I think Terry used a different player character for a little while.
Yeah.
And when he did that, it became it was like, okay, well, we know Baden, his wizard, is back at the keep. Now we know where he is. Now we can move on with the other character.
Yeah, for sure.
That's pretty much all it became.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. If you are running a campaign and you're thinking about giving the players a stronghold, kind of like the other advice, do it now. Don't wait.
Do it now. Exactly.
Even if they're first or second level, who cares? I mean,
hey, if they can get a keep at first or second level, more power to them.
Yeah,
It's for a great story.
Yeah, and it's also a great source of adventure hooks because you can always threaten to keep in some way, there's so much you can do there.
The siege of a keep is still something that I want to do as a DM. Yeah, I don't want to play it.
There you go.
I don't want the threat of death, but yeah, laying siege to a keep or being sieged, or being under siege is I think something that would just be awesome to play. It'd just be fun.
Well, I don't want to go on too huge of a tangent here, especially because this is something I'd like to discuss more in depth in the future. But I've been reading some of the newer Numenera books, and they have a really cool system for not just like having like a stronghold, but your characters actually kind of adopting like a town or a city. And it kind of ties in like mass combat rules as well as kind of like what D&D would call like downtime rules.
Okay.
And it's a really cool idea that it's like one of those things when you see it, you're like, why haven't we been doing this all along? Like this idea that like, okay, you're in this village, like your characters are in Dianar's Rest in the D&D campaign. And it's like, as you do quests to help the village, it actually has a mechanical impact on the village itself, looking at the village almost like a character with stats that would be used, for instance, if like another settlement attacked it, or if there's some kind of natural disaster like an earthquake, like these stats for the actual like community come into play, and things that the player characters do. Or like in Numenera, you build like these installations that like maybe put a protective field around the city or whatever.
Right.
Those things like influence that, like that conflict on kind of that higher level. And that's kind of cool. I'm like, I kind of want to play with this and see how this works. And I mean, that's definitely something you could pull into D&D pretty easily, I think.
Yeah, with different attributes like that, adding to like the AC of the village, or
yeah.
Huh.
So yeah, it's all about like getting the players invested more in the setting and having them kind of take more of an active role in determining where are we going to go, what are we going to do, instead of the DM always coming to the table with here's tonight's adventure. Have the players be like, hey, we want to go find the parts to build this magic item so we can make the city more defensible, or whatever they want to do. So yeah, I might take some inspiration for that with our campaign, because I already had plans of you guys kind of helping with this village that you found, kind of helping it grow. Eventually it's going to be whatever the next step after a village is, because people from the city are going to start coming, and
right.
The guild's going to have a presence there, and they're going to have a mage and all this stuff, and having you guys be more involved with that and also benefit from it. Not just like you guys are helping the city out or the village, but there's actually some kind of benefit directly to your characters for that. Like, it's a really cool concept that I'd never really thought about before. And it was like, when I read, I'm like, holy crap, this seems so obvious. Like, we run all these campaigns and adventures where, the PCs are helping out a town or whatever. And kind of taking that the next step of like, oh, well, how does that change the town? And then how does that somehow benefit the players' characters? Right. I think it's a cool idea.
Would that be because I know D&D already has things like renown and things like that filtered into it. Would it be something beyond that? So what does Numenera do for adding to the player itself?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that it really so much adds, I guess, directly to the player character. It's more that the community that they've either created or that they're kind of helping out gets better in like a way that you can see and measure.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, now that I think about it, I don't know how exactly that comes back to, other than whatever benefits might come from that. As the city grows, there's more things you can buy there. They have more money to buy stuff from you, things like that.
Right, and of course the hoping the character or the players see the vested interest in the village or the property or whatever it is.
Yeah,
and see the value in that, in protecting it that way.
Yeah, and like with D&D, if the players get a stronghold, there's this idea of like, you start out with this keep or this castle, but as the player characters are drawing followers, as they're staffing it with servants and cooks and blacksmiths and all this stuff, that kind of a community starts to build around the stronghold. People start building houses outside the walls, and flash forward a few decades, and now there's a village there. And the PC stronghold is kind of the central fortification of this new village. And I think that's cool stuff. I think I'd like to see more done in D&D with that idea. That'd be,
for sure.
That'd be cool. Cause as your characters get higher and higher level, you get more into the, like, what do we do now? It's like, we've got all this gold, we've got all these magic items. Like, what do we do with all this stuff?
Right.
And so like putting those resources into like a community, like, is one thing you could do. It's like, oh, well, we have this village that grew up around our keep. How about we spend a bunch of gold and put a wall around that? So the village itself is better defended, or maybe we start some kind of magic school that maybe one day they'll start actually producing magic items that we can use or something. Oh, yeah. Like that. I don't know. Just seems like there's a lot you could do with that idea.
So many different, I like that idea.
Yeah, and like in this system in Numenera, they have like basically like downtime activities that you can do to benefit the community, like improving the wall around it, which is going to increase its defenses, or building more like turrets for weapons or whatever.
That should absolutely be a thing in D&D.
Yeah. And then, now your community is more defensible or whatever, and you don't have to worry about it getting invaded so much when you're gone.
Right. So that the downtime actually contributes. Well, there it is. It's where the downtime contributes to your personal development as a player, and ultimately it improves the overall status of the village in one way or another.
Yeah.
That's a great example.
I dig it.
Sweet.
So I just have kind of a few more like very kind of D&D centric episodes in mind, like getting through the rest of the DMG primarily.
Right.
And I think that would be fun to do with you. Just like go through Well, chapter 8 is just like
the basics of playing the game, right?
yeah, like kind of more rules and stuff. So I don't know how much we'd have to say about that. But definitely chapter 9, where you get into like all kinds of variant and optional rules and
Mm-hmm. I have some
customizing
things to say about Chase.
Yeah.
Going through going through chapter 8. Yeah, there are a couple things in here that
Cool.
would be fun to babble about.
Yeah, maybe just go through and highlight rules that maybe you especially like or don't like, or it's like, oh, I totally forgot this rule exists. This is pretty cool. And
Like, oh, that was a rule? Whoops.
yeah. And as far as like the variations, just like, oh, here's some ones I really like and I would totally use these, or here's some that I would never use, like rest variants, where a short rest is 8 hours.
Oh, geez.
And a long rest is 7 days. Like I get what they're trying to do there, but I would never use that.
No. There's one that I would like to talk about that I came across in the combat options that I want to do. This kind of plays into what I was saying earlier about the crit one, or the natural one, crit fail.
Yeah.
Down under injuries, there's an optional rule to have lingering injuries. So you can lose an eye, or it just adds
stuff.
flavor. Now a lot of these actually hurt the character. I don't know that that's a good thing necessarily, but riffing on that, just the ability, because when I DM, there's no, when you're going round to round applying damage, there's no time to say, the swing, let's say if it's a crit or something, but the enemy is still up and the numbers aren't really there for it. There's no way to say, well, you lobbed the guy's hand off.
Right.
Because that's going to cause a problem for him.
Right.
And it's going to disrupt the play. Right.
Yeah.
So there's no mechanic to do that in D&D. And I know that's part of the 5e concept, is that it keeps it simple.
Right.
Don't have to worry about, heavy mechanics like that, but you really lose flavor if you're not willing to to dive into that. So then, so if characters are doing natural 1s or natural 20s, and it's affecting how the game itself is playing. I mean, you've said it before, talking about not flubbing the rules, but finessing the rolls. And if it's a natural 20 or something at the end of, one of the NPCs is like right on death's door, and somebody hits a nat 20, but it doesn't kill him. Maybe it would lob off a hand, or do something.
Yeah, for sure.
Do something big like that without killing him. That's something that I want to keep in my head for next time I DM.
Yeah. It's probably in there somewhere as an optional rule, but something I think every DM should use at least sometimes is the succeeding with a cost, where maybe they're making a skill check and they miss it by just 1 or 2. Instead of saying you fail, it's like, no, you did the thing you were trying to do, but there's some drawback, or some way I'm going to screw with you a little bit.
Right.
Like that can be a lot of fun, and that's a real drag as a player. You're trying to do something really important and to miss it by like 1.
Yeah.
And if the DM's like, no, I'm going to let you succeed, but there's going to be some kind of drawback, like as a player, I'd be all about that. I'd be like, yes, let's do this.
So do you think, as both a player and a DM, do you think it's better to say, well, the DC was 15 and you got a 14, so this is what actually happens? Or is it better to say, roll your die, I have my DC, I'm not telling you what it is, not tell them that, but say, I have my DC, roll your die, what'd you get, this is what happens? What do you think is better for storytelling, or not even storytelling, but for gameplay? I guess
I think it kind of varies on the situation.
Yeah,
that's actually something I think about a lot, and I've been thinking about it even more recently. A few years ago, when I went to Gen Con, I took it upon myself to run Numenera like a bunch of times at Gen Con. I think I ran it like 3 or 4 times.
Oh, cool.
For like new players mostly. And I'll never forget one of the games I ran, because is a similar thing in Numenera where you have a difficulty, like a number you're trying to hit. And because I was running mainly for new players and I just wanted them to have fun, I didn't want to get like bogged down in the rules. I would never tell them the number. I would just have them roll and then I would tell them what happened, which, I thought was fine. But I remember at the end of one of the sessions, one of the players asked me because they were trying to understand how the system worked. And they were like, so how did you determine if we succeeded or failed? Because you would just ask us to roll and then you tell us what happened. Like, did you have a number in mind or blah, 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 blah. And then that kind of made me think, I'm like, oh, well, maybe I should tell them what the number is so they don't feel like it's completely arbitrary. Like I'm just making it up as I go. So yeah, I've never, I don't think it's a thing of like one is better than the other. I think it's like depends on what you're doing. I try to think about if I think the character would know, so like if you're trying to climb up the side of a cliff, I feel like if you have any experience with climbing, you could look at that cliff and have some idea of how hard it's going to be. But if you're fighting like a monster you've never fought before, like you have no idea what its armor class is, how hard it's going to be to hit, or what the difficulty of a saving throw versus its breath weapon is. So that's kind of how I try to approach it, is like, do I think the character would know? But that might not even be the best way. I mean, probably the best way is to think about the player and like, do I want the player to know this or not? I don't know. It's complicated.
Yeah. And that's one of those things that everybody's going to have a different answer.
Yeah. I think if
based on how they want to play.
If you don't tell the number, then I think it speeds things up a bit and it gets the players not so worried about mechanics and more just thinking about what do they want to do. And also, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, but does that also, like you're saying, that also kind of lends to almost an air of not distrust, but that questioning. Yeah, what's really happening? Is he flipping the roll? Is he,
right? And that's like kind of an upside and a downside is you can flip the roll and they won't know. Like you can be like, oh, they missed it by one, but I'll say they got it, and they'll never know.
Right.
But yeah, to the player, it can seem maybe arbitrary. Like you're just like, oh, I like you today, so I'll say that succeeded. I don't like you, so I'll say that failed.
So you failed outright.
And at least with Numenera, it works a little differently than D&D. And part of the kind of the philosophy behind that system is they don't use bonuses. So like in D&D, you might say, oh, well, this roll is a difficulty 15, but you're getting a +5 to your roll or whatever. In Numenera, they would say, the difficulty is 15, but you have these bonuses, so the difficulty is only 10.
So it subtracts already.
Yeah. So it's kind of the same thing, but the idea in Numenera is that way when you roll the die, you know what you're looking for on the die. You want a 10 or higher. So as soon as that stops rolling, you instantly know if you succeeded or failed. Where in D&D, you have to add a bonus to that number. So there's like that little like equation you have to do. So there's that little delay of, oh, did I fail or did I not? So in Numenera, they're all like, we want you to know it's for drama. Like as soon as that die comes up, oh, I got it, or oh, I failed. And that really only works if you know what the number is that you're shooting for.
True.
So I kind of feel like, at least for Numenera, you should probably most of the times be telling them the difficulty. But then I see people like Monty Cook, who wrote the game, run it, and he's not ever telling them the difficulty.
Oh, interesting.
So yeah, I feel like there's not like a right answer. It's really situational, I guess, or maybe it depends on your players. I don't know. Yeah, I wonder about that a lot.
Yeah, me too.
So at least in D&D, kind of my guiding light is, would the character know? And if I think they would, then I'll tell them, and if not, I won't. And I've done that with you guys, where you start fighting something, and in the beginning, I won't tell you the armor class, but after you fought it for a few rounds, I've been like, okay, you've figured out at this point that a 15 will hit it, like.
Right. One last thing I want to say really quick, because I don't want to forget it, because I might forget it next time we talk. Or just remind me later. I want to talk about how to, in a story, if so, you're rolling an attack against an AC, but that AC has attached to it a shield or heavy armor or something like that.
Yeah.
I want to be better. I want to be good enough as a DM to be able to say, if you miss that, or you get missed, or if you are missed, if an attack is on you and they miss, for the story flavor, it really comes down to flavor because it doesn't do anything mechanically. But if we're able to say, no, it glances off your shield, or it doesn't penetrate the armor, it basically adds some value to having that shield and the armor in the story, rather than saying, nope, he missed, without knowing how or what happened in the,
Yeah, I think there's a rule for that in the DMG, like an optional rule where so a shield gives you what, like +2 to your armor class?
Yeah, +2.
So for instance, if the character is wearing a shield and the attack misses them by 1 or 2, you could say that was because of the shield.
Right. I'm going to have to reread the DMG.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's like an optional rule for that, which I think is great. Or like if you know how much their armor is giving them and it misses within that, you can say, oh, it hit your armor. Right. Your armor deflected it or whatever.
That seems like something I should be able to do with just like a list taped up to the side here saying, everybody's dexterity and everybody's armor. And be able to say, well, if you roll this, then you either scoot out of the way or you don't move in time, but it glances off the armor or whatever.
That'd be a fun thing to do. You can make a little chart for your player characters and say, here's their AC with their shield and their armor, with just their armor, with just their dex, and with nothing. And then you would know, if it hits this number, then it was because their armor saved them. If it hits this number, then it's because their dex saved them. That's cool. That would be fun.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, that'd be an easy little chart you can make and tape to your screen, and it wouldn't easily add too much to your workload, I don't think. Once you got that made.
No. You could put it on the same list that you've got with your passive perception and all that too. So it's all there for like the character stats that you need.
Or I guess another way you could approach it is you could decide how many of those things there are. So maybe like your dex saves you, your armor saves you, your shield saves you, or just dumb luck saves you. So that's 4 options. So you just roll a d4 to see which one it was.
That would be good.
Make it even simpler.
That's true.
But I like the idea of like tying it into their actual armor class and knowing for this particular character, if they roll this number, it means they hit their shield. If they roll that number, it means they hit their armor.
Right.
That's cool.
And you could even take it to where, because it's, folly on both sides, of course. If the NPC is rolling, or even if the character rolls something low, like a 2 through 5 or whatever, something that wouldn't even, it doesn't even match up to dex.
Yeah.
It would just be, you guys just you tripped as you went to swing or something like that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, we'll have to see. I'm pretty sure the rule in the DMG does not go that in depth as far as doing more than one thing. But yeah, I think that'd be fun to make that table for your player characters. And
that would, even if it's just for armor class and dex and and shield.
And maybe you wouldn't use it all the time, but
yeah, exactly. It would just be for flavor.
Yeah, when you needed it, there it is.
Mm-hmm. Especially if you're trying to kill the main boss or something.
Yeah.
Like, you missed and this is why.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for episode 258 of Game Master's Journey. If you'd like to get a hold of me, there are a lot of great ways you can do so. You can shoot me an email at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Lex Starwalker, and you can call my voicemail 951-GMJ-LEX1. That's 951-465-5391. And also, please join our communities on MeWe and Discord. And you can find links to all those things in the show notes at starwalkerstudios.com/Game Masters Journey. If you enjoy the show and you'd like to help support what I'm doing here, the best way you can do so is to purchase one of my RPG supplements, the latest of which, Adventures of Primordia, just came out. So go check that out. Oh, and thank you to my wife, Nikki, for doing the layout on that, and also for the beautiful cover. she came up with for me. In fact, she's done all my covers so far, and she does a great job. So go check that out. And thank you to everyone who purchases my supplements. And also, you can become a patron of Starwalker Studios, and you can check out my Patreon. There's a link to that in the show notes as well. And one kind of cool benefit you get as a patron is I have an RSS feed on there that includes all of the episodes of Game Master's Journey, as well as all of the episodes of GM Intrusions and the other podcasts I've done. So, you've probably noticed that the feed for this show only has 100 episodes in it. That's just a limitation of my web host, how much I can put in an RSS feed. So, if you want to hear the other episodes that aren't in the RSS feed, you have to go either listen on my website or download them from my website. But the patrons can subscribe to the feed through the Patreon and get them all that way on your podcast app of choice. So that's pretty cool. Wish I could have all the episodes and all the feeds, but I can't. But if you become a patron, you get access to that, and it makes it a little easier for you, hopefully. So I hope that you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week. I hope you have a chance to run your favorite RPG. I'll be back soon with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music, courtesy of Cloudwalker, Transboy, Renfield, Stanko, and Ish. See the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/Game Master's Journey.